All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Alexis Fernandez, and I am the Chief of the CalFresh Policy Bureau here at CDSS. I am going to get us started today with some logistics just to make sure that we're all settled in, and then I will hand it over to Kim. So for those of you that are joining by webinar, you are currently in listen-only mode, and there are two ways for you to connect to the audio. You can join by phone or you can join by computer. Amber, next slide, please. So how are we going to be able to ask questions today? If you're here in person, we are going to hand out some index cards now early on in the meeting. You can write your question out, send it up throughout the meeting, and then we will address those questions at the end of the presentation, along with questions that we receive online. So if you're joining us via webinar, you can type your questions into the question pane on your control panel anytime during the presentation. And again, we'll get to those at the end. We will address as many questions as possible during the time we have allotted, but if we don't get to them, we have your index cards and we have the chat record, so we will be able to follow up. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording and all the presentation materials are going to be online, so don't worry. If you'd like a copy, it will be available shortly. So with that, Amber, next slide, please. We are going to just do a quick overview here of our agenda before I hand it off. We have an hour and a half together. We will do some welcome and introductions, provide an overview of why we're here today, kind of just make sure we're all on the same page and level set, and then we're really going to dive into our report out on progress over the last couple of months. We're going to talk a little bit about the emerging strategies for implementation that we kind of identified as we've done this work, share that out with folks, get feedback. We're going to provide an overview of our upcoming timeline and next steps, and then of course the most important part of the day, discussion and question and answer. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kim McCoy-Wade to get us started.
Good morning. I'm Kim, the branch chief of CDSS for the CalFresh and Nutrition branch, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We have a nice crowd here in the room at CDSS, and I believe last time we checked over 100 people on the phone, so thank you so much. I truly want to thank our webinar team, Alexis Fernandez, policy chief, and then we've got Sherry Munn in the room and Amber Bonilla in space running the webinar, so thank you, Amber. But I also want to acknowledge the diversity of folks we have in the room. I see counties are here, of course CWDA is here. I don't know if I see consortia staff. Help me out. We see consortia staff, maybe on the phone. We heard from them by email, so that's probably here on the phone. We have some coalition partners, the Californians for SSI and other partners are in the room. We have outreach partners. We have state government partners. Thank you, CDA, for being here. And we have partners from the legislature as well. And, of course, many CDSS staff who are not just in CalFresh, but who are helping to implement and make this possible. So thanks to all of you for coming to be part of the conversation. Very much look forward to the Q&A and discussion at the end. Next slide, please. So let's start in the beginning, one slide only, just to remind us all what we're here to do with CalFresh, the reversal of SSI cash out. So this was enacted in the state budget this summer and will allow for the first time seniors and people with disabilities who are receiving SSI to access CalFresh benefits. That has not been possible with the SSI program's creation in 1974, so this is a breakthrough and has California joining the rest of the country and allowing people on SSI to receive CalFresh. We're the 50th state. In addition, the budget also created two programs to address those families who are already with us on CalFresh with an excluded SSI member of the household, of the CalFresh household. Those folks who, when this conversion happens next summer, experience a drop in their CalFresh benefits may be eligible for a supplemental state nutrition benefit. Those families who experience a discontinuance altogether of their CalFresh benefits may be eligible for a transitional nutrition benefit, a state-funded benefit, SNB and TNB. So that's a lot of policy to implement by next summer. So we wanted to talk with you about how we are thinking about that. Next slide. So to guide implementation, we wanted to convene this diverse group of stakeholders. It's very important to us that all are invited, that we stay connected at this point, we're at a bi-monthly rhythm, and that we offer multiple ways to participate, either in person or on webinar. Many of you were able to join us at the kickoff July 16th, just a couple weeks after the budget enactment, And the next one is scheduled for November 14th. You will get a calendar invite to that after this meeting. We didn't want to confuse you with multiple calendar invites, but that calendar invite will be going out for November 14th for our next bi-monthly all stakeholder. As always, we encourage you to check the webpage. We'll be providing summaries of advisory groups, summaries of this meeting, documents as they're produced. You don't need to wait every 2 months to get the update. We're going to be committed to keeping that updated on an ongoing basis. And at any time, questions big or small can come into the designated email box, CalFresh SSI, and we welcome them. We've gotten everything from multi-page significant content input and what's the phone number input, and all is welcome. So thank you. So next slide, please. To ground the implementation, we knew that clients are at the center of this work, and we've come at that from a couple places. Before we started running with implementation, we wanted to be sure we did at least 2 things. And one was to begin looking at the data, and thank you to our partners at CDSS. Adults programs shared the initial data that we had on SSI participants and just began to take some very high-level look at the people who receive SSI in terms of who was disabled, who's aged, and who's blind. These are program categories from SSI. Also looking at age, who's over 60, who's 18 to 59, and who's a child. There's many, many more pieces of data that we'll talk about a little bit later in terms of language, in terms of type of disability, in terms of county. I want to thank our partners at CWDA for doing some analysis of different counties. The county distribution of SSI is not the same as the county distribution of CalFresh. So looking at those data. So this was just one small sliver of the data we're starting to look at. Next slide. Of course, it's more than numbers. We also need to hear stories. And one of our first advisory groups, we were very grateful to the Californians for SSI Coalition for sharing stories of people's real life experience. And these are abridged and privacy is protected. But the story of Joe, a senior with mobility issues, living alone in a senior community with heavy financial burdens, health concerns, difficulty walking, needing a scooter, where's the grocery store, where's the county social service office, has a cell phone, doesn't have a computer, just really starting to understand Joe and how we would help Joe find out about this new opportunity and then connect with this new opportunity. Another story about Mary, lives with a partner. She gets SSI, her partner gets CalFresh. So they're one of those households that will have the ability for both of them to get CalFresh, but we'll have to see when that SSI income comes in. That's the only income that they have, mostly spent on canned food and bread, don't have a stove in their home, don't have heat. A lot of health issues, managing diabetes. How could CalFresh help with that? Relying a lot on the community to receive food from the pantry, but also giving back, being generous to the community, volunteering at the pantry. So just some stories to really help us remember the people who we are trying to serve with this work. Next slide. So with that grounding in our client experience, let me tell you what we've been up to this summer. The kickoff meeting, again, July 16th, to begin to get us organized and start the process of connecting and listening. Second, we had a statutory deadline in the budget to make sure that all the core policy guidance was out by August 1st, and it went out July 31st. Thank you, Policy Bureau. 3 ACLs, implementing the reversal of cash out, in creating the supplemental nutrition benefit and the transitional nutrition benefit all went out. In short order, many notices and forms have followed. Those have been rolling out in August and September, and we're very excited that we expect that all 17 threshold language translations will be done by the end of September. Language access is a core part of our work. Next slide. And we began to convene more focused groups with you all. The first is the CalFresh SSI Outreach Advisory Group. This group is about informing how we get the word out. How do we spread the word to people that this is a new opportunity and encourage them and even assist them to apply? So we had our first meeting on August 17th, began to look at the data, began to share stories, began to brainstorm strategies, which we'll talk more about. The second advisory group, there are 2 advisory groups, is about the customer experience, and that's about after you apply and that whole enrollment experience. We know there's applications, there's verifications, there's interviews, There may be a recert or a mid-period report, and there's ongoing communications with clients. How do we streamline that customer experience, particularly for these customers? And this group has been meeting twice to talk about the journey, the client journey, journey mapping, and what barriers do you see and what solutions do you see? I want to thank in particular the CWDA, who's helped organize county consortia volunteers for this group, and Californians for SSI, who's helped organize the advocate and client volunteers for this group. So these are small, invitation-only, really working groups that we are grateful to all of you who volunteered to be on them. There's also, as soon as those policy letters hit, the coders got to work. And there's a meeting of the automation technical group, which is the consortia staff, getting their marching orders and asking their questions and making sure we're clear about automating all of these policy guidance. So that group has been meeting bi-weekly to really understand the execution, implementation of the automation. We thank our consortia partners for those intensive meetings. And then, of course, we are in good communication with our federal partners. Both needed notice. Notice has been given, was given in August to USDA and SSA, the two lead federal partners. And we're continuing to get technical assistance from USDA on any number of issues. And then SSA, we are working towards a partnership with them on their responsibilities to screen and assist with CalFresh applications. Okay, that was the summer. And out of all of that, I'd like to show the 4 strategies that are emerging for implementation and how we are currently thinking about organizing this work, and then we'll take some time to dig into each one of them. So the 4 strategies that are emerging for implementation that we'd like to propose and discuss with you today are: first, engage and empower clients. That's been a part of why we are where we are and how we're going to get to where we want to go. And it's core to the mission of CDSS. Second, we want to target our outreach for awareness and assistance. We want to make sure that the people who need to know, who may be eligible, get that information, and actionable information, not just FYI, but information they can use to apply. But we also don't want to drive lots of people to apply who aren't eligible. We don't want to create confusion. We don't want to create disappointment, frustration, unnecessary work. So that targeted outreach and being mindful of our population, we know from the research that seniors respond to different outreach messages on CalFresh than young moms. And so being thoughtful about those kinds of things. Third, a strategy that's emerging is the streamlining the customer experience. How do we make this as easy as possible? That's work that the counties have been doing for years to innovate and streamline. How can we build on all those lessons, particularly for the population that may need more accommodations, that may have more barriers? How can we make sure this experience is as successful for them and the workers assisting them as possible? And for any of that to happen, you got to get the policy, the automation, and training right. So working very hard to get our policy and the automation accurate and effective, and then training on any number of issues, which we'll talk about in a second. So a little more on each of those 4. Next slide, Amber. So engaging and empower clients. Just to remind us how we got here, clients are why this is happening. The client voices that were so powerful through the coalition, we want to be sure those same client voices are stakeholders at the table of all our advisory groups. And with the folks who can't be at every single meeting, because there are 1.3 million people on SSI, and only 150, 200 here today, that those stories have ways to be captured and told and reminded to all of us. Client journey mapping, we'll talk more about that, making sure we understand all the processes that clients go through from their perspective. And then a new client data technical group. We have invited a group of internal stakeholders, but also outside academics and researchers to come with us and look at all the SSI data. What do we know? What could we know if we link to other data sets? Who else might have this data? And then how can we share that out? What dashboards, what maps, what's going to be helpful to all of us to work with the data? So that first meeting will be happening in October. And we're grateful again to academics and researchers who are willing to spend some time with lots and lots of Excel spreadsheets and geomapping to help us figure this picture out. Second strategy, next slide, Amber. We mentioned the importance of targeting outreach. There's 4 pieces of this that we are seeing emerge from our discussions with the advisory group. One is a comprehensive partner network. This is everybody who's raised their hand and said, I want to help. We have CBOs, we have state governments, we have county governments, we even have for-profits saying, I want to help, I want to get the word out. Give me the messages and materials and I will put it in my newsletter, I'll put it on my website, I'll put it on my hotline. And so we are started with, again, in partnership with the coalition, a master list just tracking all of those groups who are excited so that we have a list of hundreds and hundreds of groups with some touch point with a senior or person with disabilities who might be eligible for CalFresh. It ranges from the Meals on Wheels network to the Retailers Association. All kinds of folks. We are starting to really map out who could do outreach and inreach. Now, those folks will need some materials and messaging. So we are looking at developing a kit of materials that could include things you could adapt to your own channels. It might include social media messages. It could include posters, emails. That's the kind of thing we want to put together so any of these hundreds of people who want to get the word out have basically in a box. Here's how you pick and choose, and you have the best and most compelling and consistent information. The third strategy we're looking at in this lane is we also have used in CalFresh for a long time a network of application assisters. These are specially trained people from CBOs, the food banks, Catholic charities, other groups who spend that one-on-one time assisting individuals with their applications, following up on verification, following up on interviews, following up on research. We have a robust network of outreach, but we want to make sure that we are serving seniors and people with disabilities, particularly at this moment. So we are exploring in partnership with CDA and the network of area agencies on aging and other partners in the disability community who is the right match programmatically to provide that assistance, and how do we set that up in time for next summer. So we are looking at this is our deeper assister network. How can we increase capacity and make sure it's the right folks at the right place at the right time. And fourth, I want to call this out because it came up at the kickoff meeting. Again, we don't just want to say, FYI, you might get CalFresh. We want to make it easy to take the next step. So we're looking at online, in person, and by phone. Online, Get CalFresh has been a major boost to our online application traffic that Code for America does. It's about 15,000 applications a month. And depending on the community, it can be very helpful. They had a special focus this past year on college students. About a quarter of the applications now coming in are coming in from college students. So could that happen with seniors and people with disabilities? Again, that's not the solution for everybody, but is there an easy click online? In person, if you want to look up where your local county social services office is right now, it requires multiple clicks. It's a little bit tricky. So we are looking at how we can, again, with our geomapping and our list of all the county social services offices, make it really easy to find my office. What's the nearest place to me if I want to come in? And then similarly by phone, there is a statewide CalFresh information line, which comes here, and then of course all the counties have their lines. So how could we promote one number that gives someone excellent service? We're looking at various technology options around that so that when you're letting someone know about CalFresh, they have 3 easy choices to walk in the first door. More to come on that. Next strategy. Next slide is streamlining customer experience. I promised you a picture of journey mapping. That is journey mapping in action with our CDSS operations staff. That is looking at a client marching through from application to interview to verification. What happens at each step? And we just looked at, what if they're in the lobby? What if they're on the phone? What if they need an accommodation? So we just began to map, and what kind of accommodation? Physical accommodation, cognitive accommodation. Those kinds of journey mapping is underway, and collection of what we're calling a framework of solutions. What are the solutions that counties have developed, that counties have innovated to streamline verifications, to streamline interviews, to accommodate, that we can capture in a matrix to really have as a resource to counties and to the state. We expect out of that, then we can bring counties together to do that peer-to-peer sharing, learning collaborative approach. Oh, how did you do that? How did you do that? And we can help with our technical assistance team that was founded about a year and a half ago to help spread those ideas. And then we expect some things will come up that maybe a statewide improvement is needed. Maybe there's a view of an electronic verification that could have more data or more current data, and that's going to require statewide intervention. We're looking for those opportunities as well. Again, that framework of solutions. And finally, slide 4, develop policy automation and training foundation. Just want to call out the first 3 are underway: policy guidance, notices and forms, SAWS automation technical group, and USDA and SSA partnerships. But we also know that policy training series will be coming. Just topics that have been suggested, some off the top of my head. Elderly and disabled has a whole different set of SNAP rules, and some E&D is what it's called for short, but elderly and people with disabilities, things like the shelter deduction is different. So wanting to be sure we do a training on that. Reasonable accommodation, some refresher on that since we'll have a population with more of those. On authorized reps, another topic that again we expect this population to have more authorized reps. So we will, those of you who know and love our ABOD training series, our 6-part ABOD training series, you can expect a similar SSI CalFresh training series, topics to be determined, presenters to be determined, but as we come out closer to the time. So the next slide, let's take a breath and talk about timing. That's a lot of work, and we have some time to space it out, but not that much time. So here's our initial thinking of how the timing will work for these different pieces, and again, we look forward to the discussion about that. Next slide, please. Fall. Here's what is on our to-do list. The client data needs to be further analyzed and shared out so we can all learn together about our target audience. 2, we are deeply engaged with identifying this master list of partners, this smaller list of assisters, and who can help us pull together that digital kit, that materials and messaging that is targeted for this audience. The framework of solutions matrix, we're getting lots and lots of ideas that we're catching and trying to put into a matrix, but also with an assessment process for how much impact would this have and how doable is this. And by doable, it's both by implementation, but also maybe long-term. Just because we can't do everything by implementation doesn't mean it's not worth doing, but some assessment of all the solution ideas and prioritization. We are hoping to formalize our partnership with SSA. That's in progress to talk about that. We're also thrilled that CDSS is having its first tribal consultation next week. And this is an issue we can discuss with our tribal partners, government to government. A little known fact that Western Center has been quite good about is that cash out is also ending for the federal food distribution program on Indian reservations. There's a food box program on Indian reservations run by Indian tribal organizations that have also been cashed out. So FDPIR is ending cash out at the same time that CalFresh is. Nonetheless, clients can never get both CalFresh and FDPIR. So the conversation with our tribal partners as they implement reversal of cash out for FDPIR and we do for CalFresh, how we do that in coordination. And last but not least, we are looking to get the implementation date confirmed this fall so that everybody can narrow in and finalize that planning. That'll be heavily informed by automation feedback on how much time is needed to land this successfully. Next slide. So in the winter, we would expect to start bringing together people, bringing together that broader list of partners, let them know about what's coming, make sure that kit would be coming together. The county tools are coming together. Any state improvements are starting to be actualized. The policy series is launching, and the funding is rolling out. So we really need the work to start in the winter because we're going to be then turning the corner on the new year and counting down the months to implementation. And next slide. In the spring, the outreach will begin. Now, again, it depends if the implementation date is June or August. You don't want to do outreach too soon and confuse people and flood the offices. But outreach will begin in some way. The counties will also be engaging with readiness planning and training and testing, really getting ready for Go Day. And similarly, we will be doing a readiness plan as ourselves. We did this last year with ABOD. USDA required the state to do a readiness plan, and we worked with our counties implementing ABOD, which is a time limit in the CalFresh program, to do county readiness plans, and working with them on a template for that really helped them and us make sure our plans were aligned and help the counties share with each other across counties for readiness. So this is really getting ready to go, and of course, as we get deeper into this, more will come up, and I hope more comes up today from the discussion. And then next summer, I only have one thing we're doing, which is implementing. We will have a go date, and of course there will be active monitoring, active TA, active support, a lot happening around that. But let's leave it for today. That summer is really when we all know implementation will be happening. With that kind of summary of the progress and the emerging strategies and the timeline and tasks that we're seeing on the horizon ahead of us, we really want to turn to the next slide and open up the floor for as much time as we have for discussion, question and answers, other suggestions. Alexis, can you let people know?
Yes. So let me just do a quick reminder that if you're on the phone, now is the time to add your questions to the question box. We already have a few here to get us started. If Kim can read my writing, if not, I will interpret it for her. And then for those that are in the room, the questions can be sent up on the cards. If we can manage, we'll take them live, but we just want to make sure everyone on the phone can hear. So do you want to kick us off? So the first question here is a policy question, a good one that now I regret not putting on a slide, but the question is, can we confirm that the SSI payment itself will not decrease as a result of the policy change, and will client-facing collateral include that message? So yes, I can confirm that the total SSI SSP payment will not decrease as a result of the policy change. As a reminder, we're actually going to be increasing CAPI payments, so that's the Cash Assistance Program for Immigrants, for parity with the SSI SSP payment, so that CAPI payment will go up by $10 per person, and there will be no change to the total payment. We'll also make sure that that message is clearly articulated as we develop our outreach tools and kits, because it is important, and we've heard a lot of the concerns around this, so you can at least now confirm the payment will not change.
And you know what I think, before we propose these slides, let's add it to the background slide.
Yes.
That is the number one question we get, so we'll add that to the background slide before it's posted. Thank you.
Yes. Follow up on that topic? Yes, Andrew.
Hi, this is Andrew from the Coalition. I just want to say that we are putting together a one-pager from the Coalition perspective on just what the change, and emphasizing, not now for next summer. And trust me, one of the first goals would be the payment will not change. As a result, we are getting the same question. I want to reinforce the same.
Great. So for folks on the phone, the SSI Coalition will also be issuing some kind of FAQ fact sheets fairly soon, so that we're all on the same page about that. Okay, so Kim, this next question's for you. How can a nonprofit or community-based organization get connected to the resources and toolkits that you mentioned?
Yeah, so for now, email CalFreshSSI at dss.ca.gov. Our outreach plans are led by Brian Kaiser, is our outreach chief. Alexis is our policy chief. Brian's our outreach chief. So Brian is putting together the plan, but that's always your point in. And anything you can tell us in that email, I have a network of X groups serving X people, and we would love things to use in a newsletter or a conference, or anything you can tell us. We're trying to have that captured in this growing Excel sheet so that we can make sure the kit meets your needs. And then we will also build our communications list with you so that when we're ready for the webinar, when we're ready to do surveys, or as this rolls out, we know how to find you. So that's your email, and then Brian Kaiser is the name, so you don't have just an anonymous email.
Great, and so on a similar topic here, have things like using 211 as a resource, or some actual changes such as a shorter application, been considered in the outreach and customer experience advisory groups?
Yes, so the outreach, this has been confusing also, but the way I visually think about it and in process think about it, the outreach group is looking at everything from you first find out about it till you apply. And so one of the things we want to think about is, does there need to be a phone number in that process? Oh, I just want more information. Oh, I'm interested in applying. And of course, all the counties have phone numbers, but we don't think the flyer listing 58 phone numbers that could be challenging. That could be challenging. So we are exploring, could there be one information number? There's many ways that could happen. Again, the state does have a low volume CalFresh information line that does not connect to an eligibility worker at this point, right? So what's the options there? 211 is a nonprofit network that has a special relationship in San Diego, but also serves statewide, assessing that. The counties have call centers, assessing that. So looking at all those options to see if we can provide a phone number. The second piece was not just 211, the online application. So one of the questions on the application, again, there's sort of two places to look. There's the Get CalFresh, which has had success in logic-driven, right? As soon as I know you're a college student, I'm going to tell you about college exceptions. If you don't tell me you're a college student, I'm not going to tell you. So could Get CalFresh be tweaked to, once we know your age or once we ask about disability, provide a different, more appropriate screen? And that's the kind of conversation we also want to have with our portals. Again, mindful of the timeline and mindful of the budget. What can we do with our portals that already, the online portals that already have a logic in them? Is there anything we want to test drive that logic as a senior person with a disability? See if there's any ways that are to streamline that, or even pop-up messages or text messages or how-to guides. That's the kind of thing we want to engage with our consortia partners on. How could that be as friendly as possible? Again, practical given the time and money constraints we have. But both of those are online doors that we're looking at how to streamline.
Okay. This is a clarification request. Can you, for the folks on the phone, repeat the statement you made about the SDPIR program and the impact that reversing cash out will have on that program?
Yes. So there's two things to know. The first thing is that just like people on SSI have been cashed out of CalFresh since 1974, people have also been cashed out of FDPIR. So people on SSI have not been allowed to receive FDPIR. And again, FDPIR is a food box program run by independent tribal organizations in partnership with USDA. It's not a state program, it is a partner government-to-government program. So just as we, the state gave guidance to the counties saying cash out will be reversed next summer, USDA will be giving guidance to the Indian tribal organizations to say cash out will be reversed next summer. And we want to be sure we're saying the same things. Does SSI benefit not dropping, making sure people understand that. That said, the second thing to know is it's always been the case that people cannot receive both CalFresh and FDPIR. And that does not change with the end of cash out. People with SSI will now be able to get CalFresh or FDPIR, but still not both. More to come, particularly led by our partners at the Indian tribal organizations and USDA, and we'll know more after next week's tribal consultation about the specific next steps on that.
So I see a question in the room, and I'll repeat it here for the folks online.
Just real quick, FDPIR, just for language sake, it's used interchangeably with CalFresh on the tribal organization thing. Like, they don't call their program CalFresh, they call it FDPIR.
I believe that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so a point of clarification for the folks on the phone, SDPIR is a distinct program from CalFresh. So hopefully, we assume, I don't know that we would know for sure, but folks who receive FDPIR reference it separate and apart from CalFresh. And it's just to say that it's helpful, about 4 million people get CalFresh right now, about 5,000 people get FDPIR. It's a very small but very, very important part of the food safety net in California. Okay, so I have a few questions here that I've grouped together. They're on the topic of automation and kind of what the eligibility systems will be able to do. So the first I can answer with confidence. So one of the questions was, as an example, has the SAWS Automation Tech Group addressed the capability of ICTing, SMB, and TMB program benefits? And the answer is yes, because in the two implementing ACLs, we were very clear that both SMB and TMB had to move with a client when they request an inter-county transfer. So I have my other folks in the room with me, but basically at this point what we've started to do is identify what data needs to move with the case in order to effectively continue service on SMB, TMB. And so things like who the original household members, those are new data elements that do need to be sent over in an inter-county transfer. So we are mapping what new data elements need to be added to the system. So yes, that is well underway and should be ready by the implementation date. Okay. Similar question is around whether the eligibility system is programmed to implement the elderly and disabled household shelter rules. And the answer is yes, it can do that today. So what we're looking at is just how do we, more really of an operational and training issue, how do you make sure that as you run eligibility, the system is implementing the E&D shelter rules, and that as an EW, you know that that's what the system is doing. And so we do have that on our kind of radar, and the system can do it today. Medical as well.
Training.
Because the number of people will be so much bigger.
Well,
right now, most of the people who get E&D, the question was, why do we need training? It's really a refresher training. We want to make sure everyone is up to speed, ready to go with seniors and people with disabilities. These are known rules. We have a growing population of seniors, particularly from 60 to 65 before SSI kicks in. 60 to 65, but 60 is senior in USDA in CalFresh land. 65 is SSI. So we have a growing group of 60, 65. So we absolutely are already running the E&D rules, authorized rep, reasonable accommodation. But with the SSI bringing in so many more seniors, we just want to do a refresher series, both for our county partners and our outreach partners, so that everybody has the latest and greatest.
And it's the trifecta approach. You have the policy guidance reiterating current policy and new guidance on new policy if needed. You have the automation backing the policy guidance, and then you actually have the training to make sure that staff on the ground are kind of reminded of many rules that they already implement today. So it's just a trifecta approach, if you will.
Now, I think it's okay to let the outreach people know about this rule, but as far as the welfare worker is concerned, the welfare worker should not be able to deviate from that. The computer should force them to do that. And
Agreed.
if they are able to deviate, then we have a problem.
Agreed. Policy automation training all to be in sync. Agreed.
And that's what we're doing. Okay. So this next question is for you, Kim. What are our thoughts on what the communication plan would be for those SSI recipients who may not be eligible or who may not be enrolled initially and need to be caught in like a second wave?
Well, my thoughts were to bring those questions to the Outreach Advisory Group meeting in October. But I think the second question in particular, well, both questions. The first question of, if I'm understanding it right, of the 1.3 million universe of people on SSI, but yet we're expecting about half of those to be eligible and come on the program, can we successfully target without too early screening people out, right? We don't want to discourage anybody either. So I think that's the crosswalk with data and outreach. We're going to look at, can we hit a sweet spot of targeting without discouraging people who should come in and have their deductions worked, and let's see what we can do. On the second piece, this is very much on my mind. What you did not see here, I said on this timeline, is that implementation, we're done. We are not done at implementation. There is a whole ton of work to do. My operations team knows that management evaluations and quality control and technical assistance will continue, but we also expect to be doing that ongoing monthly data analysis to see, well, how are we doing on uptake? Who did we miss? What demographics, what language, what county, what door, where are we having challenges, and then to be able to pivot either our partner network or our sister network, or if there are other issues, if one of the doors is not open as wide as we like, can we open that wider? So I think that ongoing monitoring, a continuous improvement cycle that we strive to embody will be really in full effect once we have real numbers after implementation.
Okay, and so we're not going to leave the topic of automation because we have a couple more questions. So will the consortia, the eligibility system, be programmed to recognize the shortened certification period that was established in the implementing ACLs? And the answer is yes. And again, that's the type of detail we're working through in the technical group. But yes, the systems will be set up as required by policy to assign shorter certification periods, and for everybody's memory, so that in 3 years from now, we don't have a second giant wave of folks hitting the county. So we're going to spread that out between 19 and 36 months, depending on the household type. So
one time only.
One time only. That is already underway. So these next set of questions are about data, and I'm going to kind of group them together. The first is about data that's available from SSA, and what we will be able to share in terms of what we already know about SSI recipients and how we might use that data. So I will just start from the kind of policy perspective by saying that the first thing we need to do is really map what is available today. And so that process is starting just this month. We are connecting with our county counterparts to do some real digging into what is available today, What screens do you need to use to get there? What do we know about the information in terms of its age and relevance for CalFresh? As well, what's missing and what might we need to add to our data agreements so that we have as much available about SSI recipients both before they engage with us as applicants, but also as they become applicants, what can be used to potentially verify eligibility.
Let me just make the clarification. We're talking about data in two different senses here. So previously I've been talking about aggregate data, numbers, groupings. What Alexis was accurately speaking to is individual data that we know about you that can be used to help establish your eligibility or your ineligibility. So if we already have if Kim Wade goes to apply and we already know that you're on SSI and we already know what your income is and your social is and your county of residency, maybe we don't have to ask you again, right? So that's the site visit that Alexis's team is doing in partnership with the county to sit at the terminal, look at what you see, look at what can use, again, make sure policy, automation, and training line up on what data that individual case data that we have that can be reused for CalFresh appropriately. Two different kinds of data conversations happening.
Will that analysis be shared with the advisory groups? Absolutely, because it will likely become policy guidance that will be issued formally so that all counties, all stakeholders and partners are on the same page about what is available and what can be used, because we definitely don't want to use information that is not relevant to CalFresh and then could lead to error. So we all want to be on the same page. Will data be available for the entire SSI caseload or just CalFresh eligible households? That's what we're really digging into now. And do we have enough to tell whether you potentially might be eligible? As soon as we map the data, we'll be better equipped to answer those questions. So that will be coming back to the work group. Okay, and now on data, but going back to the client data. So our original slide about who we think our clients are and what their characteristics. Can you give us more context? And we may not be able to do this off the top of our head, but of how many SSI recipients are potentially eligible? I'm trying to remember all our numbers. I know we have it written down somewhere. And just thinking through our capacity to serve all those households.
Well, that's what all the advisory groups are about, the highest level. But we do have some numbers. We are aiming to get one of the follow-up documents from this meeting. Yes, the PowerPoint will be posted, but we're also looking to get out a couple-page fact sheet that's a little easier to share and digest. And it will have at the top those high-level numbers that were used in the budget estimate, so that we are expecting 300, my numbers person's even in the room, so raise your hand if I get it wrong, 369,000 new households that are all entirely SSI members. So some of them are one person, some of them are two person. So 369 households, but that's going to be closer to 450, 500 people. Okay. Then we have another 120 who are excluded from cases. And those are the folks that will be being worked at their report and at their research to see, is your benefit increasing when that income is added? Is your CalFresh benefit decreasing when that income is added? Are you discontinued from CalFresh? And so the fact sheet that we're finalizing and being informed by the discussion today will have those key numbers right at top to know. But that is one of the things we want the work group to look at, is look at the assumptions behind those estimates that drove the legislative and budgetary process, and then turn to going down deeper by all these different characteristics that will help inform our outreach and our customer experience work. And then thirdly, turning it into tools that are useful to counties and outreach partners. Is that dashboards, is that map? What would actually turn an Excel sheet into something that's useful? And we do have, as you know, many of you know, the CalFresh does have a data dashboard already where all of our key indicators are up there. We have maps about WIC dual enrollment. We have maps about CalFresh dual enrollment. You could imagine possibly some SSI maps, but that's the kind of thing we need to see from our data experts what's possible and see from our partners what's useful.
We have a comment in the room.
Another 120 you mean 120 households or 120,000 people?
Well, they are both. 120,000 households have at least one SSI member who's excluded. Most of them it's one, but some of them might be two or three. So those are household numbers, and we can push that out to people as well. The 369 households of new 369,000 anticipated new SSI-only households, and 120.
72,000 with decreasing benefits. 7100 discontinued. And 40.
That's where I get to the 120. So these numbers we'll follow up with, and then we'll be on. But it is that group of households that have people who are receiving CalFresh but have an SSI number or more, one or more excluded, was broken into those three subgroups: advantage, disadvantage, discontinued. So those are the numbers we're tracking of those four folks who, again, all have a different, the messaging to the new people is different to the messaging of the continuing people, and how we segment our work as strategically and effectively as we can.
And I will just put a plug for our website and remind folks that the slides from our last meeting are posted and have an outline of all these numbers and more details. I'm getting some policy questions. I'm just going to let the folks know on the phone that I'm holding because we'll follow up just so that we can keep the discussion going on some high-level stuff. But there's more info online, and then I will follow up via email on little kind of in-the-weeds policy issues that we can clarify. So I'm going to go to a couple of other questions here. Again, these next two are also policy issues. Just as a point of clarification, we've talked about the SSI, SSP total benefit amount not decreasing. There was a follow-up. How could that be if we are ending the SSP program? And that is also an important point of clarification. We are not ending the SSP program. The SSP program, the state supplemental payment, allows California to draw down the federal share of the SSI payment. So it must stay as it is. So the SSP program is not going anywhere. The coalition's fact sheet.
As will ours, yes. No change to SSI or SSP.
And then there's just another question here about non-traditional living situations. Many SSI recipients do live in institutions, group living arrangements. This will be another topic of policy guidance that we'll be addressing in the next couple of months because there are unique rules for those individuals who are in institutions, and their eligibility often depends on the size of the institution, the number of meals received, whether it's, for example, a drug or alcohol treatment center. So we will be addressing all those categories of non-traditional living arrangements. I'm sending my stare to Jennifer, who will be issuing that guidance, but it is also on the list. Okay. And there's quite a few. I want to check time and see if you wanted to maybe continue with Q&A. It's short. Okay, let me see if I can. Okay, so where can I find a list of the 17 threshold languages? I can provide that in follow-up. So when the department issues notices in threshold languages, we use the state's 17 threshold languages versus a county that may have a unique set. So our county partners will be looking at whether the 17 we have available meet their needs. That's why they've been issued so early. Okay, this is a good one for you. What is the message, and I think for the group more broadly, what is SSI recipients right now while we wait? And I think the question,
should I call on some of the SSI recipients to take a crack at it? We have been saying this wonderful opportunity to get nutritional assistance is coming next summer. More to come. And now we'll say it will not affect your SSI, SSP, but I think we're not really trying to get much beyond that, to let people know it's coming, but it is next summer, and SSI, SSP is not affected. But I welcome other coalition leaders or advocates or clients to say what the right message is at this time.
Exactly what we've been telling folks.
Those 3 points.
I would only just say that we're also encouraging folks to stay in touch with us. We don't want to lose anyone, and that's easier said than done, but keep sending folks to me or Russell, certainly.
More importantly, we've at Resources for Independent Living, we've been informing people of that very message, but also that they will need to be in touch with us and seeing us to facilitate the process.
So that's great. So the fourth part is, and there are get connected. Right. Get connected with Coalition or the Independent Living Centers, or that's right. That's great.
Or get back to us at the beginning of May, because if it's beginning of May, then they could apply for June. At least we know if it's going to be May, June or August. So the best thing is to say, hey, get back to me in the beginning of May. May 1, Labor Day.
All right, so we're back to the numbers.
Oh, gosh.
Just a clarification, one I can take, the next one's for you, Kim. The data, the individual level data that we have available, the question is that data that the county has collected or ... And it's two-part. We're looking at both data that has been collected by the county, either because an SSI recipient is an excluded member of an existing CalFresh household or possibly engaged with other programs at the county, IHSS, some limited Medi-Cal data because they're not receiving Medi-Cal through the county. As well, we're looking at data that the Social Security Administration has made available about their recipients. So it's kind of a combination, but we're digging into all sources to see what is the most indicative for outreach, but then also policy.
And again, Alexis was speaking to, at the eligibility worker county level, what client level data is available to assist with application and enrollment. On if you will, the analysis side of the house, that's where the academics and researchers are meeting in October, we have data from our internal CDSS partners who administer the SSP program, right? They have some basic aggregate data. And that's what we're looking at, everything that SSP knows about. And then again, is there crosswalking with IHSS data matches or Medi-Cal data matches or other data matches that we could do that would tell us more that is useful for, again, targeting outreach and being prepared for enrollment season.
So this is Kevin, when you go live in the month of June or the month of August, are we going to start getting reports like how many people applied, how many were denied, how many were approved? On all three programs, are we going to start getting that kind of information, or why were they denied?
Right, so that information is collected now and reported monthly on the CF 296 app approved for the whole program. So specifically, we are going to be monitoring that because we do want to see if we have problems, and I think that's what we want to talk with our legislative and county partners about what is expected to be shared publicly beyond the current report.
But
that's correct.
I think that's not separate. What I'm suggesting is we should have another one.
Yeah, understood.
For SSI.
Yeah.
So we know what's happening. I mean, all of this work that we've done.
Yeah.
What's the outcome? Because if we learn the CF1, the CF37 ain't going to give us that.
No, the reason I pointed that out is because we already have a mechanism. That's the good thing about that is we have a foundation that is collecting that data. But I understand your point absolutely that in order to use it to inform continuous improvement implementation, we're actually looking at people who are elderly and disabled, SSI, the subgroup. So what we need to figure out with our data group, with our legislative oversight, because we also need it for SMB-TNB tracking, right? How much SMB-TNB uptake is happening, how much spend down. So we need to monitor that, and the right times and places to share that is one of those things the data group and other stakeholders will be looking at. Thank you for sharing that.
That's the data follow-up.
Sure.
This is Andrew. Definitely appreciate all the work being done on data. There's not just the client aggregate, but there's obviously some pieces within each of those. Is there at least an ideal time frame so that the data investigation can inform the others, realizing the clock is ticking on all of this? I mean, I can clearly see on the client side, it's exciting to hear about a visit to actually look at the screens, dig more deeply on, what is someone in a county environment seeing and perhaps able to use. Understanding there's other work that's going to feed into, what's going to be available from SSA. Similarly, on the aggregate side, trying to do some diagnostic work that could inform perhaps the outreach or others, right? So
all of that's on my fall list. Yeah. All of that has to happen in fall, whether it's the solutions, whether it's the outreach strategies, whether it's the key numbers. We have to know that in fall to start moving it in the winter. So the data group meets for the first time middle October. So we need the experts to kind of help us do that assessment of, well, you'll know the perfect thing in 3 years. Right. That's not so helpful. What can I know in 30 days, 60, where do we have data sharing agreements already in place? Can we share out this in aggregate? But that's what we need some assessment on, is what can we get that's useful? And so that group, Diana Jensen, who's worked at a county, worked at a food bank, and done some consulting with us. It has a nice 360, but it's really people from California Budget Project, Center on Budget Policy Priorities. Trans agreed to be there from Justice and Aging, and then UCSF, Cal, other institutions that I probably should not be forgetting, have volunteered to help us look at it. So I'm hoping after we meet with them, we have much clearer marching orders on what's specifically possible, but the highest level, we need to know what we're going to know in fall to do it in winter and spring.
Okay, so this is another high-level kind of characteristics question. How are we accounting for the difference between the 1.3 million SSI recipients today and our estimates for who we think may be eligible and enroll?
I will give the high-level answer, and then I think this is one of the FAQs that will come out of the data technical work group, but part of it is about income. SSI income is different from CalFresh income, and part of it's about living situations and institutional living versus independent living. Are there other high-level factors, Ray, that you would add as why 1.3 comes down to that living situation is the big one. So that's what we want to show that math, explain that math in a way that makes sense to people. We don't want to underestimate, we don't want to overestimate, but our estimates job did do a fair amount of work looking at the characteristics of California's SSI population, slightly different from the national population. But we want to stress test that data with other colleagues to see what else, does this make sense? What else did we miss? How else do we refine it?
Hi, this is Dean from CDA. As follow-up to that, how does the uncapped shelter deduction play into that or not play into that?
Excellent. So the challenge is we can't know what we don't know. So on uncapped shelter, this is one of those challenging data issues where when you don't have someone in your program, you don't have information about them, so you don't necessarily know how much their shelter cost is today. And so we are able only to make limited assumptions around shelter, and we know that that's going to have a great impact on their benefit amounts, possibly their eligibility, depending on the household composition. And so unfortunately, Ray and I have spent lots of time talking about how we wish we knew more. So we are trying to figure out what our sources is, what assumptions can we make about average cost of living in different regions. But today, it's hard to guess what their shelter deduction will be without having them on our program.
369,000 could potentially be more based on what they're actual.
Yeah, could be more, or their benefits could be more. Which is good.
Yeah, so that's one of the questions that we have for the data group is does somebody know? SSI doesn't necessarily know your housing, but does somebody else have done that research or analysis that says they have a paid-off mortgage, their housing cost is quite low, they're renting an apartment in Oakland, their housing cost is quite high. Like, is there anything we could do to help us make sure we're in the ballpark? So, and we're getting more questions about data to remind us the DDS and the regional centers also have lots of information. Thank you, Marty. And will implementation be rolled out statewide or by county? Statewide. There's two pieces. When the implementation date is set, anybody new can apply at the same time. People who are a part of those cases that are excluded, they will be transformed in a rolling basis based on when their next report or their research, or they can initiate any time. But we expect that 120 we talked about to kind of spread over the first 6 months. What's more unpredictable is the newly eligible cases, how quickly they'll all come in.
I have a follow-up to that, but I'll take yours first, Russell.
Sure. So I recently attended a local CalFresh advocacy meeting, and there was a lot of concern over the Get CalFresh method. What would you say to those groups and kind of how?
Oh, I'd love to listen. I'd love to listen and hear more.
Is there a way that maybe we can try to find? I mean, I feel like there's county level discussions that are happening, regional, and we need to figure out how to get that and the information flow to it.
Yes, and we have heard, we have some reports. It works differently in every county. The county opt in, and some counties have opted into verification, and some not. We see statewide the numbers, but that is definitely in the outreach advisory group. Code for America is part of that, and I think that's the kind of dialogue of. Is that a tool? And if it's a tool that needs these improvements or tweaks, can we have that dialogue? And that's exactly what we're hoping to. And we can have those not just at the huge table. We can have small breakouts to talk about particular topics, do deeper dives. Thank you for raising that.
On the topic of the expected influx of people, this question is about the capacity to process. What conversations are happening, and has there been talk of things like a pilot or a rollout? If you could address capacity to process such a large number of
Well, this is definitely a hot topic, if I may say, in the counties and CWDA, particularly in Los Angeles County, which has the biggest influx coming, and fortunately has the biggest network of offices and staff and call centers to absorb. I think there's lots of things happening. There's thinking about leveraging all the innovations that have been happening around same-day service, around full-service call centers. Those things, can they be scaled and stood up and spread so that there's more of those places? The second thing is people are going to look at overtime. There's no question that people are going to need well, we should have that's on the table, that overtime may well be needed to get ready for this one-time wave coming in of a caseload growth. And then I think there's also some people this is reassuring, some people this is not so reassuring. There's echoes of ACA, right? Counties went through a huge one-time wave, 2014, looking back. I should not, that date should be carried on. And so there is some experience to learn from that. This is very different in some ways, and there are some connections. So I think people are, the counties that I've engaged with are excited about the opportunity to expand their mission to finally serve this population, are appropriately starting to think about the planning and what combination of technology and staffing is going to help get through. And do our very best, and that's part of this real-time monitoring what's happening so that we can help with resources as we're able to, and counties can help each other get through, if we are successful at outreach, potentially having a big initial wave. The only other thing I would say is, while these are going to be for families who are new to our program, individuals who are new to our program, walking through CalFresh for the first time, making sure we have that shelter deduction, making sure we have that medical deduction, having that interview, explaining rights and responsibilities, explaining STAR 7, that's going to take some time. So we want to get that right. Once that family, that person, that case is set up, we do still have the Elderly Simplified application project, so that folks are on a 3-year cert period with an annual interview for most of these cases. So hopefully it's a real intensive onboard. And then for the client and the worker, they don't have to start 7 due in 6 months. There's a little bit of space. I wanted to bring some good news to the story. So, but the upfront, a new group of folks, and with important pieces to work through, not just eligibility but deductions and possible accommodations. We want to be sure that time is there. So these are the kind of conversations. I don't know if CWDA wants to add anything to that in terms of counties thinking and getting ready for wrestling with these operational issues.
Okay, changing topics. What is the goal of the CDSS SSA partnership? Or is there anything that would be formalized? And what are you looking to get from that partnership?
Yes. So we are learning about this. SSA and USDA have the national partnership where SSA, Social Security Administration, has 2 jobs, which is to screen all SSI applicants and renewals. I don't think that's the right word in SSI.
Certification.
Recertification. Same word as in CalFresh. Okay. There's 4 questions. So in 49 states, they're already asking those 4 questions. They're going to turn them on in the computer and ask people in California the 4 questions. But then there's a second piece, which is assist. So that's what and they are paid by USDA to do that. So we are learning about what that expectation is, but then we're also working on how to operationalize it. What we are learning is that all other states do it by paper. And we want to explore, given that there are 58 counties and 120 social service offices, if there are other ways, leveraging online or call centers or other technology. So we are just beginning to share to learn about each other. I think we are trying to drive to an agreement, a $0 agreement, because USDA is already paying, but just to roles and responsibilities, who's doing what. So right now I'd say we're in the learning stage about that, but we very much expect that will be one of the key partners in spreading the word, assisting, troubleshooting, letting us know. Now they won't have the volume because they see people, nothing is changing for their, right? Right. But we are hoping that they will be a source of applications with us, and that there's possibilities to use like the CBO portal, so we could track how many are coming from SSA and track the approval rate and make sure that it's a quality app. So that's the kind of operational nitty-gritty we're into SSA on those two. There may also be opportunities for that traditional outreach, but we're kind of starting with the core responsibilities of screen and assist, and then we'll look at outreach opportunities, perhaps speaking to their regional directors, and perhaps posters in their lobby, perhaps events. All that could become. Pardon me?
They sure love to sing.
Yes, there are mailers.
You're right.
Right, that's a pro and con. Do we want to be another piece of paper, an existing mailer is cheaper, but then is it a mailer that people are going to look at? So that's that user testing. We want to make sure we're thoughtful about what gets mailed when to who and why. Yeah.
We're going to do a question check-in because I just want to acknowledge for folks on the phone. We are receiving and recording a lot of small technical questions about policy, which we'll be following up in writing, issues around the voluntary request, the STAR 7, some additional questions about the payment. So we will address those online, but I want to kind of open to do a check on whether there are additional high-level questions.
Yeah, and maybe we can do a last call, maybe 5 more minutes. We have it until noon. I'm happy to do that, but just let's see where we're at. Happy to talk.
Is everybody there or online?
Yes, I have everything recorded. So for the questions that are coming in, there are a lot of like ACL type questions, so we will follow up in writing. They're the types of things that will come out in Q&A and fact sheets.
Yes, you want to say that the department will be publishing?
Oh yeah, so that's actually a great topic. So as a result of the technical work group, we've identified a lot of kind of guidance specific to SMB, TMB, and the reversal, and those formal kind of responses will be issued via quarterly ACL. So you can expect to see 2 or 3 additional ACLs before implementation that are kind of memorializing Q&A type questions like, what does a voluntary request mean? We've formalized that in that group, and those will all come out via ACL as well. So they are being recorded.
Just as a SSI recipient, also one of those mixed households that I'm in, as far as my children get food stamps. This is more of a comment since we're on the high level conversation thing. I think for most people in my situation, whether you're on SSI or even potentially county with disability households, historically, for me, SSI and the county have been known to be the most, they want the most information about you. So some of the pushback that may come from the disability community is going to be, I have these 2 very intrusive agencies both combining to intrude, if you will. So just,
that's super helpful. We heard some of that in the customer experience work group, that streamlining the verification, on the one hand, it's just about lightening burden and fewer tasks, but it also is about that sense of intrusion and what's happening with that information and what's it going to be used for. And if I tell CalFresh, are you going to tell SSI? Right. So we want all that to be very clear in this verification process so that people both have a good experience but also are even comfortable entering into that experience. Yeah. Thank you. Other reactions to even just pulling back to the 4 strategies, or what's not here? What are we missing? Yes.
Maybe on a little bit of both. You mentioned partnerships with CDA and area agencies. Can you speak to anything on the healthcare side? I know it's been a little challenging. Some of us in the advocates days we're used to opportunities like federally qualified health centers, but thinking about the full scope status of SSI recipients, I know some of us, at least including myself, not knowing always the best piece of the complicated healthcare apparatus to be looking at for partnerships.
That is a good addition. I would say where we are is we've begun with aging, and we're also reaching out to Department of Developmental Services and Department of Rehabilitation to look at those networks. But in terms of mapping, there's about 6 different state departments that touch healthcare, and figuring out where that's I think we should put that on our list and do some assessment. I don't know, Brian, if you have initial.
Anna forwarded the contact for, and I forget that person's name. She sent me like 10 yesterday, but the FQHCs was one of them. I think it's tapped in their network as well. So it is
still a good idea, yeah.
And if you know someone in the coalition who is an expert in that world, who can navigate us through that, we would welcome that. Who's who? That's the kind of thing where we really are relying on you all to help us learn the ecosystem.
Yeah, building that map is really challenging. So we have a huge spreadsheet that has all of these networks identified, and we are adding to it literally every day. We're putting more names on there, but if you have other ones, I would love to Give us a list, and you can add to it, or.
And the intention is to bring it to the outreach advisory group in October to say, what's here, what's missing, what's wrong, who's not. So
That was really my.
that's what their assignment is to get it as big as you can, and then we'll show you the draft, and it will not be perfect. That's why we're bringing it to you, to tell us to get it right. And it will then it'll be growing.
So I've got a couple of things. One, was my understanding that there was about 1 million households on SSI who are living independently. So if they're living independently, then they should be potentially eligible. That's what we got in the data for March.
Okay.
The other thing is that Medi-Cal recipients every year, they go through a recertification. Why can't that be combined for CalFresh and have one form to be
For all
completed?
CalFresh folks or people with SSI?
Say again?
Are you speaking more broadly to why CalFresh research is not synced with annual Medi-Cal renewal? Or are you speaking specifically to people with SSI? Because these are,
Do
you can answer either. No.
Medi-Cal?
Not with the county.
And well, first, it's not processed with the county, but Medi-Cal actually has a new type of kind of touch points they recertify you, so it's not every year. It's at a time of a change, you get the next 12 months. If you report a change before 12, you get the next 12 months. So they have a different recertification process than CalFresh.
There are many counties that increasingly, if they open it for Medi-Cal and there are tasks pending for CalFresh, will work the whole case. But syncing the dates, given that Medi-Cal has this different push-out rhythm than CalFresh, which does not, is not something that you can effectively do without making the client constantly redo CalFresh to keep up with Medi-Cal.
Yeah.
I know. Aligning the programs is always the goal, and where we can't align the programs is can we make it less painful and can we reuse information and have you communicate in the way and time you want to. But yes, you're right to always go back to the root question. Does the policy have to be this way? So appreciate it. Yeah.
Something that I would think is missing from these early, overview kind of conversations is when there's a new program like this, eventually there will be some type of fraud, right? And there'll have to be a fraud prevention conversation at some point. I think that we should just kind of engage how that is, when that does come about, right? Or even if it's part of the initial setup, how does it engage the whole overall scene, right? So, I don't have any answers, obviously, but that should be something that should be on the map and radar.
Yes, and thank you for saying that. So there's a couple things I can share. Fraud is led by an independent area of our department, but and there is, within the SNAP program nationally, there is a robust fraud program. The department runs individual, and the feds run retailer, which is where with EBT cards, more of it happens. There's an increasing third area, which we're increasingly getting engaged with, which is third-party fraud. Right. Third-party skimming your card, this stuff. Yeah. And so that is very much on our mind in how we make sure this population is not any more vulnerable to third-party fraud. Is that where you were headed?
Well, that too, obviously. Okay. But then also, definitely, obviously, but also we want to make sure that when those kinds of policies start having to be, followed upon, cracked down upon type of thing, that we're not somehow allowing this segment of the population to be unnecessarily, I don't know what you say, not targeted isn't the right word, but disproportionately affected by these things. Because, you never know if you report one thing to SSI last month and you haven't seen, or last year, and you haven't seen them for a year, and then you report to the county regularly. We don't want to have somehow SSI using county record that they, somehow it's miscommunication more so than it would be purposeful, third party.
Yes, you are. This is perfect timing, Joseph, because the 3 policy letters on reversing CalFresh SMB and TNB were issued, but a separate letter on fraud and integrity is coming out for all 3, and you're raising issues that I don't know are on their radar, and so we will commit to make sure that our fraud colleagues are engaging. Andrew and Mike, I'm looking at you, of course, Asma and Christiana, at the coalition as well, to be thinking through, especially those cross-sectional issues that may not be aware of.
And especially while the program is still in its infancy.
That's right.
Because there's maybe just loopholes that we're just not aware of.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, and we don't want to always come back to the resistance.
Absolutely.
And then, maybe down the road when everyone has clear steps and people have been on food stamps and SSI for 5 years, those are things that could be discussed later or whatever. But just during this infancy stage, we have to make sure that the data is not being used in a way that's unethical.
That is, I'm really, really glad you raised that, and I want us to think about how we can communicate more clearly about that. And so fraud requires an intent to defraud, right? So there is a small piece of fraud that we want to both make sure people know about, but also are protected from other people defrauding them. A broader problem in our program that we're actually working on is inadvertent. I didn't know I had to report this. I didn't know, which results in an overissuance. And then a collection.
Or they're suspended for so long for whatever reason. I'm not sure about it.
No, but you're in it. You're exactly in it. You're exactly in it. And so I think an overissuance, overpayment is us. And so we want to take that back and think about, we have been working with the consultants for about a year to tackle OIOP with our CalWorks partners to really make sure people are getting accurate benefits at the first time. Better for clients, better for counties. Let's do what we can. And what at the state are we doing that's making that hard? And so to add the SSI lens in it, we definitely don't want next summer to bring with it. We want a spike of people getting the help they need, but we don't want to see a spike in overissuances or errors or fraud.
I mean, because if this is confusing problem for the professionals, right? You got to imagine it could be very confusing for the recipients. And we don't want that to turn into a me versus you kind of deal.
Correct. Well said. I don't know if everyone on the phone could hear that, but if it's confusing for program leaders and for LGA workers, it's just going to be confusing for clients, and that's a big part of how do we keep it. It's not just going to make it fast and non-intrusive, but reduce the likelihood of inadvertent errors. That is very much part of our lens. So thank you for surfacing that.
I think the SSI households are less prone to have overpayment because all of their income is about the same for both.
Yeah, it's the deductions. We want to make sure we don't mess it up. Right. Yeah, the income should be fairly stable, right? But it's that shelter and health that we want to make sure we don't cause problems. Purchase and prepared separation, household So
household comp is the big one,
Yeah. So this is why we're going to be doing some, already we do a pretty heavy analysis of causes of errors in our program and what are the leading causes of errors. And so that we can kind of go at them each by each, but crosswalking that with this population and which of the most common errors now might be more common in this population, and we could do some preventative work around. So I appreciate, I know you raised it as fraud, and there is a fraud concern, but there's also an error concern.
That's what I meant.
Yes. Yes.
Especially early in the process.
Yes.
We make sure that's being considered.
Yes.
Income reporting too is a thing to think about, because although it's, broadly painted as a group of people that are not earning income, it's not necessarily universally true. A lot of people go through a lot of pain to go to Social Security and report. And I don't want them to have to do that for CalFresh as well. That would be
like the able Act.
Yeah, so we do have rules about when you report income mid-period and which are a source of can I say source of pain, generally, and so how we can, which we are working on anyway generally, but how particularly.
Yeah, and I will say some areas of income reporting rules, we don't have flexibility. So I think what we have in our control is client education up front about what is expected of you as a household and when you do need to report, and making sure that it's very clear. And so while we may not be able to change all the income reporting rules, making sure that we're educating folks up front is on the list from the customer experience journey mapping.
But I also think access is just as important to us as accuracy, because it's not helpful to clients or workers to get it wrong. And so it makes me think if we want to have maybe a separate, just at least a one-off or a couple meetings just to dig into accuracy and possibly integrity, but those are two different things. But just to really make sure we're focused so much on access, but that we also have that deeper conversation about accuracy. That's super helpful feedback. We can do that. That's great. Amy, you might get the last word.
Knowing that ABOD waiver will be lifted for most counties next September?
No, we don't know that at all.
Hey.
We don't know that at all. So the other major policy change in CalFresh, just briefly, is the ABOD time limit for single adults. We've had our whole state's been exempt for that until this month. The Bay Area, specifically San Francisco and Santa Clara, San Mateo, are implementing the time limit starting now. And the question that we're all on the edge of our seats about is who will be the next wave next September. because those counties will be implementing both SSI over the summer and ABOD September 1. So the good news is we'll know, the waiver is due September 30th, so we'll know by a week from Friday who we have requested to the feds. And then those counties will know, and that will be part of their planning. We're still crunching the numbers and making sure, looking at options and consulting with folks to see but we're hoping, again, to minimize the number of counties who are in that bind of trying to do the two biggest policy changes in CalFresh within a couple months of each other.
Are you guys looking at zip codes within the counties?
We are looking at protecting the most people possible, and so lots of varying pros and cons of ways to do it. But yes, we will be consulting with folks very quickly on that. Dean.
So this is Dean from CDA. I just wanted to thank you, Kim, and your staff and CDSS to start this process so early in the engagement of stakeholders, because, from the CDA and AAA and C4A side, we're not experts on SSI and so forth, but this process has really helped us to start planning ahead and start engaging our network and leveraging those relationships at congregate sites or family caregiver programs so that we can help folks who may have applied in the past, don't understand that the cash out is no longer,
Right.
And so we want to use those relationships to help, encourage people to apply come June or August, whatever the time frame. So thank you for starting early, and thank you for keeping.
Well, and that gives me the chance to say what I wanted to say, Ben, was thank you for bearing with us. We have been scrambling to convene meetings and make lists, and those of you who said, hey, reached out and said, hey, I didn't get that email, and we resent it, and you were very nice about it, thank you. The good news is that we are very close to having a project manager starting in a couple weeks to be the sole point person for all things SSI. And then everything's going to be smooth. But thank you for your patience as we are all multitasking and scurrying and being collegial and collaborative as we work to get it right. We really are trying, and you are too. And thank you for also telling us when we get it wrong in a collaborative, collegial way, because we'll do that too. So with that, keep the feedback coming. Lots of great nuggets. We are committed to. I'm going to add a couple things to this based on what I heard. But post this, we will post a meeting summary from today. We are also catching up on meeting summaries from the advisory groups. We promised you that, and we're playing catch up there. Some data, we'll be posting that. Other deliverables that short term, that's the immediate, the next few days. And then there'll be advisory groups in October with summaries from those, the data group summaries from those, and this be on a rolling basis. And then you'll all come back November 14th, and we'll do it again.
And so for November 14th, you'll be able to access the registration via the website. So if you don't get an email invite, that's where you can find it. But we will be emailing all the participants from this meeting who logged into the webinar or who registered. But again, if you don't get it, you can still register on that website. So visit the website. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And Amber, if you could shut down the webinar, that would be great. Thank you, everybody.